welcome to the Warrant Committee, and welcome to everybody who came to tonight's budget wrap meeting. I see some selectmen, some folks from the library, the school committee, the town administrator, town accountant, all sorts of folks. So thank you very much. We are going to talk about use of one-time monies tonight. We're going to talk about revoting the non-contingent budget, given some small changes that occurred, no major impacts. We're going to talk about effects of the possible override and then hopefully vote the contingent budget this evening. And then if we have time, we'll talk about some articles. Though the way our conversations have been going, I think that that might be overly optimistic. To start the evening off, though, could we start by discussing the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for March 13th as written.
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. So, for the first order of business, I'm going to bring up the free cash spreadsheet. And we haven't seen this for a little while. I've made a couple of adjustments to it that I want to discuss with you. For the Milton Access TV folks, if there's any way for you to increase the brightness on the wall, the folks in the room here are having trouble seeing it. Or maybe our eyes will adjust to those lights. So I will run down the sheet. The one-time monies that we've been discussing include $158,000 for the consolidated facilities repairs and maintenance line, sick leave buyback for the parks, a bunch of appropriations for the schools, including enhancing the ELA curriculum, Spanish texts, upgrading the STEM classroom, discovering justice, the world language library books, and then sick leave buyback excess. And then in addition to that, $200,000 for the general stabilization fund. On the advice of the town accountant, which I think some of you saw in your email, I am not recommending an appropriation for the capital stabilization fund this year because of Steve McCurdy's interesting concept about borrowing from the capital stabilization fund in order for us to accomplish the street light LED retrofitting, and it didn't seem appropriate to be putting money in at the same exact time that you're borrowing money out. So no appropriation recommended for the capital stabilization fund this year, and we have done that in the past when we fully funded the CIPC recommendation, which we're doing this year again. Under the articles, funding that would come from one-time monies include $150,388 to OPEB, the playground planners related contribution, which really goes to the Parks Department to make purchases for the new playgrounds of $112,000. The records, public record software, which is for an upgrade in the town clerk's office, this previously was $50,000, and on new information from the town clerk, I've reduced it to $40,000. We have there the street light LED retrofitting, which of course has a cost associated with it of $350,000, but we have it in here as zero because we're planning on borrowing that money from the capital stabilization fund with the intent to pay it back. Variable message boards and radar speed monitoring. The master plan implementation funds of $15,000, the remaining coming from operational money. Hopefully that line will be permanently funded eventually, but the scenarios that we've been discussing probably are only going to fund it at about $25,000 with operational money, so this is to supplement that a bit. No legal appropriation here. Affordable Housing Trust Fund of $40,000. All right. Oops. It's back. The preservation of permanent records. You remember that this was previously on the sheet at about $150,000. We had a discussion with town accountant. She was going to go back and talk with the committee and with town clerk. We did fund this in part last year. It's going to cost about $15,000 a year for 10 years as of last year. So we have 9 years left on that. We could spend in excess of $100,000 on it if we wanted to completely finish the project in 1 year. But given the other priorities that we have, I was thinking that funding it at the $55,000 level this year and then hopefully finishing it next year would be good. Still much accelerated from the 10-year plan. Then the Fire Station Building Committee, as you know, submitted a request for $2 million. And the Capital Improvement Planning Committee gave some advice back to them about what length of time that could be borrowed over. And based on that advice, they went back and rethought their approach and are going to be asking for a $40,000 amount of funding for fiscal year 18 in order to hire a consultant to define the project, bid out architects, bid a project manager, and develop the project timeline in order that they might present that at the town meeting in May of 2018. So they're hoping $40,000 will get them to a place where they can get that presentation ready to present it at town meeting in May. And then there's the other non-bonded capital items which are described on the CIPC request. Amy, did I miss anything? Any worries so far? No? Okay. Let me ask, what questions do folks have at this point about the use of free cash, and any observations you have? You can try to make that a little bit bigger, if you don't mind losing the comments. Anything at this point?
Well, we talked a little bit about every time you use free cash.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about delaying the
Well,
process somewhat?
yes, the conversation was that we don't want to be using free cash for operational items.
Right.
And you really want to be using them only for one-time items. There was an arrangement over a couple of years where different boards in the town agreed that they would use some amount of free cash for some operational items, but we're not doing that in this request at all. So I
Okay.
feel pretty comfortable that this will, this approach will please our rating agencies and the Department of Revenue.
Okay.
I'm looking for feedback on the distribution of funds, or are you happy with it? Is there something here that surprises you, that where you wanted to be spending more or less?
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Does this fund the full capital planning recommendation?
Yes.
It does, okay.
There's something that they're probably going to have to revote. I think that some numbers have decreased, and they are meeting on Thursday with the Fire Station Building Committee. So I'm hopeful that they're going to vote in favor of putting that $40,000 into their budget on Thursday, and then we'll get a revised recommendation from them on Friday. So if we vote this and they make a decision on Thursday that they don't want to fund that $40,000, we'd have to bring this back and probably relook at what to do with that $40,000. But my preference is if folks are in agreement that that is $40,000 well spent, I'd like to vote this tonight and allow Julia to put numbers into the warrant this weekend so that we can be reviewing it next week, not making inputs next week. While you're thinking, I'll point out that this is the non-contingent scenario. We need to discuss for a couple of minutes what we would like to do differently, if anything, under a contingent scenario. I highlighted the cell for the consolidated facilities repairs and maintenance line because the Capital Improvement Planning Committee recommended $158,000, and we made an allowance for that on this worksheet under the non-contingent scenario. But you folks know that under most of the contingent scenarios that we're reviewing, we'd be funding a permanent line item for consolidated facilities for building repairs and maintenance in the amount of $100,000. So to leave that there the same in both a non-contingent and contingent scenario would mean that the Consolidated Facilities Department would get a windfall in fiscal year 18 if the contingent budget passes. And I say windfall in quotes because it would mean that they would get $258,000. Of course, they've testified that they could really use $1 million a year and well spend it. But I wanted to point that out because under a contingent scenario, maybe you wish to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund more. Maybe you wish to fully fund the preservation of permanent records. Maybe you would increase the amount of money that we're putting into OPEB. There's a couple of possibilities there. You could also decide to take some or all of that $158,000 and simply reduce the amount of borrowing that is recommended under the CIPC recommendation. We could just borrow $158,000 less. So I need some feedback on that. Yes.
I'd just like to, I'd like to see it stay where it is, because I think this is gonna be a tough year. And I think you're giving it to the right company to do that. I think that consolidated facilities will, you know, be a safety blanket if anything goes wrong with the buildings and they can't afford to go outside and hire someone. I think that would.
I'd also point out that under the contingent scenario, they would be getting probably an FTE or two, and maybe they would be able to fund more projects for
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are the workers that they had. What do other people feel? Chuck?
Oh, I was gonna make a motion to.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I do that? I'd
You
like to
can
make a
do
motion
anything
to
you want.
approve the non-contingent one-time cash expenditures as presented and discussed.
I second.
I'll take Lucinda, so she finished it first. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Great, thanks very much. Now, what about a contingent scenario? And I can put one up on the board if you like, if you want me to change some numbers, or if you want me to leave it the same, give me some direction.
So is it really just that one?
You could change most things on there down. You can't increase things that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee has set a dollar limit at unless you want to go back and ask them to reconsider raising their recommendation. So I got a new worksheet here for contingent, and again, we can leave it the same if you like, or we can reduce borrowing. We can put more towards OPEB, more towards the master plan implementation, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the preservation of permanent records. Any of those are probably good targets to think about.
So the master plan has been reduced, the
Well-
implementation of the master plan.
That's a good question. Why don't we put this on hold for a minute? And I will pull up a preview of our contingent discussion. And you will see, oops, I accidentally closed the contingent.
Can
Yep, go ahead. What's your question?
I was gonna make a recommendation
Okay.
that we vote the little bitty non-contingent, then we can move on to the contingent, see where we end up, and that may affect free cash,
Okay.
right?
Yep. Yeah, and also where we end up voting the contingent budget might determine how much funding there is for master plan implementation
Exactly.
and a couple of other things. So we might want to put some more money there under a contingent scenario. Okay, so then I will put up on the board the non-contingent budget, which I have made some changes to as outlined in an email that I sent to the committee, and I will review them quickly now. The Blue Hills Technical Regional High School budget came in $79,000 less than we had originally expected it to. Our debt service is coming in about $22,000, or almost $23,000 less. Our wage set-asides are now expected to be about $14,800 higher. The net result of that is about $87,122. Based on a recommendation from this committee the other night, I applied the same percentage cut numbers that we had to add back numbers. And so if I do that, 73.14% going to the schools, that is $63,721. I increased the school non-contingent number by that amount. And then the other was, what was left over then was $23,401. I spread that $23,401 to 3 different departments. And you see the breakout of that on this slide. $2,733 I'm recommending to the Board of Health because we did vote a cut there, but they still haven't identified how they're going to meet that cut and make that recommendation. It's a very small, tight budget, so that's one we might want to give some relief to. Then, based on feedback from the town administrator, he asked us to prioritize replacing one of the library cuts. So I put back the $17,229 that was voted to eliminate the part-time library assistant. They still would have to close on Saturdays, but this would probably prevent them from having to close on Wednesday nights. I then was left with a couple of $1,000, and I applied that to the consolidated facilities line to decrease that a little bit. So their cut used to be $20,000, and now the consolidated facilities cut is $16,561. So that was where I put the balance. I did send that out in an email to you folks the
Yeah.
other day to think about, and I'd love to hear your reaction to that plan. Chuck?
Seems perfectly reasonable.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. I love that feedback.
I agree with that.
Thank you, Jean. Does anybody think it seems unreasonable?
No.
Or want something different? I would take a motion then.
Yes,
Chuck?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the non-contingent budget as presented and discussed.
As amended?
As amended.
Thanks.
Second?
Second.
Take Jim, thanks very much. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Great, thanks very much. Okay, so the non-contingent budget is behind us, and now I will give a preview of the contingent. So, as discussed in that same email, I've created a couple of scenarios for us to look at. There are a low, medium, and high range, A through E, A being the lowest scenario and E being the most expensive scenario for a contingent budget. And those all factor in the priority lists that were given to us by the department heads. I then took the priority lists from the town and the priority lists from the schools, and I color-coded them to match the dollar amounts on that previous tab, so you would see how far down our funding would last. So this block right here is scenario A. You add to that scenario B if you're looking at that second scenario. You add to it scenario C, so you get all the way down here if you're funding through to scenario C. Same deal on the school side. So here you have the A through E scenarios, given the prioritization that the departments provided us with. In addition, Phil had presented an idea for another version of a scenario, and that was to look at, I believe his goal was to try to get the number below the lowest scenario that we were talking about the other day, below the $3 million mark. He had surveyed us of who was looking at $3 million, and I think his ask for us was perhaps we could look at funding positions that were replacement positions, and then maybe some top priorities from both the town and the school side, and approach that $3 million. So Phil didn't give me any input into this yet, so this is not Phil's plan. This is some augmented version of the advice that I took from Phil at the meeting the other day, and just put it together. So there were a lot of caveats in the email that I sent you about what was included or excluded. So if you look at these second two tabs, you have, this is the town side. I colored the font in white for every appropriation that would be included in scenario P for Phil. So one of the obvious problems here is I left out the fire backfill staffing wages or overtime, which we would need to discuss, and there's a couple of other things as well. This list looks, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Phil?
your total for my idea is almost exact, but my idea included the fire
Okay.
as a restoration.
So would you,
So
do you,
it was 295, 294 was the total.
all right, so if I add that in, that brings the town side funding, brings the non-school department's funding to $668,000, which changes scenario P to 2.946. So a few dollars over scenario A.
Yeah.
So looking back at that list again, thanks, Phil. I have included everything that's in white font, where the dollars are in white font. So some disappointing things that aren't here. No $100,000 for the roadway stabilization fund. Nothing for the master plan implementation committee, except for the $15,000 that we may vote in the free cash. Nothing for the law department, which may be overly optimistic. I have a feeling this money is going to get spent whether we vote it to be in the contingent budget or not, unfortunately. And you can see the rest of the things below scenario C that aren't going to be included as well. On the school side, there are less things that have white font, and that's because those things have a higher average cost. So I replaced all of the items that were replacement positions. You can see them here. The restoring the vice principal, the tech support in grades 1 to 2, the assistant principal, the reduced bus fees, reduced sports and activity fees, restoring the guidance counselor, restoring the English teacher, and then I added in their top priority, which was the 2 math specialists, and that got me to very close to the same amount of restore plus number. So right now the school restore plus number is $700,000, and the town number is $668,000. So very, very close to parity now that I've added back that fire money. So that brings scenario P to 2.946. So we need to have some discussions about these various scenarios. Betty?
Well, two things that sort of jump out to me, and I know that this committee has verbalized the feeling about, it's not our job to pass the override or advocate for how to win an override, but having been a town meeting member for over 30 years and having worked on many overrides, I can't help but not think about what people care about and what's important. So as I think about two things, I think about the reducing sports and athletic fees by half. I think that's a very important thing that lots of people, even if you don't have kids in the school system, but you went to the school system when you didn't have to pay for athletics. I think that's very important. I'd like to see a way that that could get restored. And also closing the library on Saturdays in the summer, I think is untenable for lots of folks who work during the week, and that going to the library on Saturday with your children or by yourself is really a vital part of the community. So I would like to see if there's a way to restore a little bit of money for the library so that they can remain open on Saturdays. And I would love to see us figuring out a way to add that $130,000 into the school side so that we could reduce the sports and athletic fees for families and for the children.
Are those comments with regard to the non-contingent scenario or the contingent?
The contingent.
Okay, so under the contingent scenarios that I put up, the town shortfall is entirely replaced. So the library would be made whole as it
Okay.
is this year. So those summer Saturdays would come back.
Okay.
And then the reduced sports and activity fees is in scenario B. So either.
So that $3,140,000 number includes that reduction.
Which number are you?
Scenario B.
Okay, so scenario B would include, it's $3,140,000. That would include the replacement of the bus fees, yes, and the activity
sports
fees. Yep.
fee, okay.
And that's also in scenario P right now. Some folks were talking at the last meeting about the price of the last override and the last contingent budget that passed. And so I put that number up here. It's in the range of scenario C. It was 3.420, $3,420,000. So just slightly lower than what scenario C is. And I think that a couple of people told me after the meeting, came up to me privately and said, I wish that we were talking about a range, that it was in reference to the comment from the Board of Selectmen of 3.4 or whatever. They were saying, I wish that we were talking about a range that was less than the last override. And so I was doing some thinking about that over the weekend, and I didn't factor it into these scenarios here, but it occurs to me now, looking at the number, that we don't have to fully accept any of these scenarios. We can make some tweaks to them, just like I made to scenario P earlier when Phil made that observation. We could possibly take $30,000 out of scenario C and get that number below the last override, and maybe that would make folks more comfortable with the contingent budget. So I just wanted to point that out. If I pull up the town side, scenario C ends at row 19. So you'd have to find $30,000 up here that you'd want to remove from scenario C between here and the schools. The schools have scenario C ending at row 19, which is the transitions half FTE adjustment. If you found that $30,000 somewhere that you could reduce between these two tabs, you could get that scenario C number below the cost of the last override. So that was a question a few of you posed to me, and I wanted to get back to you on that.
So we're on like an egg hunt, we have to find out.
You could be on an egg hunt if you wanted what is in scenario C, but you were uncomfortable with the amount of the contingent budget for fiscal year 18 exceeding the cost of the last override. You don't have to go as low as scenario B or scenario A or P. You could just shave $30,000 off and have that same feeling that you're not asking for as much of an override as the town did last time. Or maybe that doesn't matter to you, and you want to fund the town where you think it needs to be funded, and that is C, D, or E, or whatever. You guys are going to have to get chattier. I know there's TV cameras and there's a big crowd, but this has to be a discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd just be curious, I mean, what does that accomplish? I mean, just getting it below an override from
It
a
gets
very long time ago?
it gets to the marketing discussion. We're not asking for as big of an override as was passed last time. It's just a talking point
Okay.
to me, but it's important to some people, and they asked me about it, so I wanted to get
I
back
would
to
just be
them.
curious for somebody that's important to know.
Yes.
What is
Just-
that?
Mark?
From a marketing perspective, $3.448 million in the last override's equivalent dollars would be a whole lot less. I mean, when you take into account inflation and the time value of money.
Mhm.
We have 8 years, so, that's probably the equivalent of a $2.8 million override back in 2010. Seems somewhat conservative, I think, in the context of a 8-year time frame where we haven't had one, and in comparison to the last dollar amount that we actually passed an override for.
Yep. And that ties into something Lucinda was saying the other day, where she was asking what is the impact of the various numbers that we're looking at. Lucinda, I found an electronic version of the sheet that I couldn't find printed out.
Yeah, I had this.
So I put in here the cost of scenario C, since it was in the middle, so that you could see what that impact was. The last time there was a successful override, it was 3,420. There was a 6% increase due to the override, and the override impact to the average tax bill was $418. If you were to fully fund scenario C at this point, the increase due to the override would be 4.7%, to your point, Mark, and the dollar increase to the average tax bill would be $395. There's a range down here now that shows the effect upon various assessed valuations. The average assessed home is in the $620,000 range. So the average assessed home under scenario C would see an increase in their annual tax bill of $379, or it comes out to be about $32 a month.
And what would have been in scenario, what is it, D, the 3.6, what was the percentage increase?
So the scenario D is, let's see, 3656842. the average home valuation being around $600,000 would see a $402 increase annually in their tax bill, and it would be about $34 a month.
So it's still less than the override in 2010, was it? The percentage increase due to the override, is that right? 6% then?
That's the way I'm reading it.
Right.
And could you do that for B too? Sorry.
Did you say B like boy?
Yes.
So B is
3140.
3140524. Okay. That's $600,000. That would be $345 or $29 a month. You like that one?
I like scenario B. It's on the low end of what the selectmen kind of recommended. It includes the activity fees and athletic fees. Seems like a pretty good number.
On the town side, it gets you down to priority 15, which is the master plan implementation committee. And then on the school side, it gets you to row 16, the reduced sports fees. Others, need to hear some feedback. Yes, Phil.
Well, I made my argument at the last meeting for keeping it, trying to keep it under 3 million. We hashed that out thoroughly. There doesn't seem to be a lot of support for that. B is not far from where I am. It goes over 3 million, so it lacks psychological value, but it doesn't really add a lot to the size of the budget. We should keep in mind that whatever number we're looking at in terms of the increase in property taxes is on top of the 2.5% increase that everyone's going to get anyway. So they will see their taxes go up more than what we're saying. Not substantially more, but by more. So B sounds to me like a pretty reasonable option. I'm glad that it preserves those school items that Betty had mentioned, because those items are important to me as well. Could we look at it in the opposite way? Could we look at what we're lacking in B?
Yes.
What we're missing?
Brian Beaupre is going to call in just a minute. So, of the town side, or the non-school side contingent priorities, we would have everything from recommendation number 16 down. So we would be leaving out the roadway stabilization fund at $100,000, the laborer for the parks, the public health nurse at the Department of Health, the conservation agent at the DPW, forestry, the trees, computer replacements for the town, professional services in the master plan, the second half of the master plan implementation committee, I should say. It would not restore the backfill wages at the police department. The planning board would not receive these minimal increases, veterans, inspectional services, et cetera. And then the other big hits, the consolidated facilities department, maintenance assistant, and the position at the library assistant, and the associated materials would be left out if we voted scenario B.
Okay, but both police officer positions were included. Right, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so it was just the backfill.
And then would you say?
It was just the backfill that wasn't included.
For the police, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the school side, things that would not be included below scenario C, restoring the guidance counselor, restoring an English teacher, the transitions position, the professional development for the teachers at $100,000, and the 2 SPED positions for COTOT grade 5 and the transitions.
I mean, I think it does a pretty good job of capturing the bulk of the priority 1 items. It comes in at a relatively, I think, reasonable amount for an override.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm inclined to go with that scenario, the 3.14. I think it does meet as many of the needs as we reasonably can do, and it provides as palatable a override situation as we can come up with at this point. In fact, I'd be willing to move that we adopt for a contingent budget the numbers set forth in Plan B.
Second.
No, I'd like to
Was that Chuck?
comment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Comments? Maggie?
I'm still trying to restore the part-time conservation agent that it's 30% of what, the $10,000? And I know Michael wants that part-time nurse, and that's very short money. First of all,
Nurse and obliterator of rats.
yes. You know, the Board of Selectmen are going to be coming up, and they're going to be changing the composition of the Traffic Commission, and they're making the DPW director now in charge. He lost a secretary. I don't even understand why he hasn't even put back for that. He's only putting back for a part-time conservation agent. There are no people to do the administrative work in that department. I was on the subcommittee for DPW, public safety, so that's why I've gotten to know a lot about their budgets. I think it's very important. My tax dollars, your tax dollars, are being wasted by having the town engineer, you're having the director of operations in DPW, we pay them big money to do secretarial and administrative work. To me, this is a no-brainer. It's a necessary position.
Yep, Chuck?
I'd like to make is it a friendly amendment?
Maybe.
To add those two things, what is that, 16 grand or something like that? But no more.
I have a question.
Yeah, hold on one second. The total cost would be $16,515 to add those two positions into scenario B. Can you hold
Yes,
while we just finish
absolutely.
the discussion? Michael?
Yeah, I thought I heard something about the roadway stabilization fund, that we should be putting something into that. So taking all of that out might be a problem. And on the school side, the 2 sped positions, I thought that was like, last I heard, that was like a thing that was like kind of mandated by the state. It's, you know, they're going to have to, I would like to see them get the $128,000 for those sped positions.
These are not mandated positions, so we would not be falling short of a mandate, I don't believe. They're positions that the school department really wants, but they are at the end of their priority 1 list. So I think if they were...
They're not a mandate, okay.
Yeah, if they were contractually or legally required to have them, they would have been in the non-contingent request.
Well, can I just make a point about
Yes.
that? It depends on next September's enrollment, because you never know your student population from year to year. It can change rather dramatically, so they may have to, I mean, if the kindergarten enrollment coming into first grade is really large, they're going to have to hire another first grade teacher or another kindergarten teacher, so they don't know what each year brings, so they may actually, you know, their party list right now, which I agree to, could change
Yep.
quickly, so what might right now be a request could become a mandate depending on who walks in the door in the fall.
And I don't know what the school committee would do under that scenario, but if they were following this same level of prioritization, and the last item on the level of prioritization is $130,000 for reducing the sports and activity fees, they may keep those fees right there and then fund any required sped positions of the same amount. Or they
So I
reduce
guess
them less.
I should ask Betty, are there anything that we're cutting out on scenario B that is in the nature of something the schools really kind of need?
Well, because of our growing population, I know that the guidance counselor position is needed. The transitions program that they have listed here is a program where they're trying to keep children that are coming out of the hospital or, you know, and had a lot of medical issues or psychological issues, have them have a place to go and a program that supports them. So I don't know the specifics because of confidentiality, but that's a program that's up and running now, and they're needing more support services for that.
Other discussions?
Can you talk a little bit about the roadway thing that Michael just asked about?
Mm-hmm.
$100,000.
So right now, the motion on the table is to fund through scenario B. So the things that are in C that wouldn't be included unless a friendly amendment was offered for the public health nurse and the conservation agent, the laborer at the parks, and the $100,000 for the roadway stabilization fund. So we have a separate article that we're probably going to approve that creates the roadway stabilization fund. But if we eliminate that entire $100,000, it would be funded zero for its first year of existence. Do you have your hand up, Lucinda?
Yeah, well, I'm semi-putting it up. Can we do with the cash that we were talking about?
The free cash, yeah.
Yeah, the free cash. If it's cut out of here in the contingent, I can't remember what the total was. Could we put it into the free cash?
Yeah,
Is that a solution for it?
It's a potential solution. So I think it was $158,000 that was approved for the Consolidated Facilities Department. Under the contingent budget, we're only funding that at $100,000.
Right.
So maybe you'd want to take 50,000 or something
Right.
and put it in the roadway fund or something else.
Right, because I'd hate to see that go out completely. I hit potholes all the time. I'm really tired of them.
Well, yeah, any little bit helps, but keep in mind, we're underfunding roadway improvements to the tune of about $3 million a year.
That's what was bothering me, so that's why I'm like, I think that's a drop in the bucket.
So we're not gonna
but-
fix all of the potholes
But
with
we'll
fire.
fix our street.
No,
But
you
you'll
don't do
fix the
that. There's a stream under the street that never goes away, so it will never go away. So I won't get it personally, but those other places I go are scary.
All right, so there is a motion on the table to approve scenario B. There's maybe a friendly amendment to add in the public health nurse and the conservation agent. Are there other things that folks want to discuss about scenario B plus, we'll call it?
But again, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago. When I look at the amount, I like the fact you have that chart that bubbles up and down as you need it. I
Oh,
have
you
to
wanna see
say,
that?
yeah,
Okay.
I just, I can't speak for all people at different levels, all right? Because I'm in a different area. But if I look at someone who has a $500,000 or $600,000 house, and they're getting that increase on top of their their regular 2.5 increase. And if I just feel as though that's a lot of strain. I can't speak for them, but to me, the houses down at that level with those amounts being increased just seem a lot for me, like, in my mind. So I don't really want to go above B. I think B, and again, it's just a balancing act, but I just cannot believe that we do not want to keep, imposing these additional fees on people in stormwater and everything that's been going on, that the average person, if they have 4 kids in that house, they're spending a lot of money anyway maintaining their lifestyle. So I don't want to go above B. That's a generalized comment, that I think that B is reasonable. And it's more just basing on this table I keep looking at. I look at it in terms of me, and I'm like, yikes, I don't want to deal with that. I'll think about that tomorrow. I'm going to be Tara. So I want people to think about it in terms of the impacts on their own budgets. And again, because I can't relate to every level of housing and everything, I have to believe a majority of people in the town are going to be impacted by it. And we don't want to go above the B. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I want to reduce it, but I don't think we should go any further than that. Jonathan?
Totally understand what you're saying. I just feel as though you're losing out for, the arguments you're making are sort of, in my mind, between support or non-support. 2 million, 3 million. I
Right.
mean, your taxes are going up.
Yep.
You lose it between B and C. I mean, 345 hertz, 360 hertz, whatever. It's not a big number. You're losing out a lot of key initiatives, in my opinion. You look at the average house, you pop it in here.
It would
Yeah,
change from $29 a month
Yeah, I
to
mean-
$32 a month.
But more importantly, your tax bill it's $30. I don't think anybody's going to say yay or nay over $30. I think you're going to say yes or no,
The whole concept.
period. $30 is not going to be a yes or no vote in my mind you're dealing with.
That's monthly.
No, that's yearly.
Monthly.
The increase between the two for a $600,000 house was $30.
Between the, yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
On a
All right.
tax.
From one scenario to the other?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. Chair Conlon, did you want to come up? Or any of the selectmen? Sorry, Dave. Welcome to the table.
Thank you very much. We had a suggestion, why don't we have our town administrator tell you what our suggestion is for some additional items that are purely small amounts, if you'd consider adding those into the scenario B.
Okay.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Yeah, we just had a brief conference there. I know there's a motion on the table for Agenda B, which is $3.14 million. We had talked quickly about also adding the conservation agent. As Committee Member McAvaney had said, in addition to that, funding the parks position and moving the planning board professional services, master plan implementation committee number up, but reducing it to $10,000 instead of $25,000, just so that it's funded. So we would take items 17, 18, 19.
So you would remove the roadway stabilization fund from scenario C, and you would add back $15,000 for the master plan implementation committee.
10,000.
Sorry.
10,000,
You
yeah.
want to reduce that by 15, so you'd add back 10.
Yeah.
So the net effect of that would be, it would be scenario C minus $90,000. Which is 3.358.
Well, that's only taking
I
into
think-
account the
yeah.
town side.
Right.
I think we have to ask the schools now.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
We will.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
We will ask them, but I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that I'm
Right.
understanding the changes correctly. So you're asking essentially for scenario C, without the roadway stabilization fund, but adding in $10,000 additional for the master plan implementation.
You said that much better.
Correct. Michael, did you say something?
Yeah, they're taking 15,000 out of master plan on line 24.
What is it, 24?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're not actually getting down that far.
That's because in the non-contingent budget, there is 15,000.
Right.
And with the 25 and the 10, then that gets us to the 50 that the master plan committee was seeking.
Okay.
And for the parks, you know, they have 3 full-time workers, and we don't feel that that is enough to be able to take care of all the parks in town. We have a booming youth sports program. These fields are utilized around the clock. There aren't enough fields, but every town and city is faced with that. And I really believe, though, it would be advantageous to consider adding that.
Which line item is that?
It's the labor in parks, right?
17.
It may be a different scenario if we had more turf fields, but as we know, that comes at a cost. A lot of our fields are grass, and they need treatment.
Give me a minute to play with the sheet. So I'm gonna copy the master plan implementation committee line. And I'm gonna place it over the roadway fund. This is what happens when Tom doesn't come to the meeting, I guess. And instead of $10,000, it would be $100,000. It would be 10,000, right?
Correct.
Let's see if that made the change to my sheet. So
Very good.
3.358.
I think you overwrote the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think we did override, take the wrong thing out.
You got 2 master plan implementation, 10
Yeah, we
and
took out
25.
the DPW.
Oh, whoops.
There it is, conservation. What about the nurse, no?
Thank you.
The nurse is down on 18.
I think I did not overwrite the wrong thing. Did I? So I wanna overwrite the roadways. So now we have 2 lines for master plan implementation committee.
Oh, okay.
And so instead of 100,000, this is 10,000. Okay. So that should have changed scenario C. 3358. I will open up the other file just to check what scenario C used to look like. Scenario C used to be 3448, and now it's 3358. So the new scenario C, which the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator are asking us to consider, is reduced by $90,000, but includes $10,000 for the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
And
Maggie?
does it include the health nurse or the conservation agent?
Yes.
Both, okay.
So the motion that's on the table is for scenario B.
Mhm.
And the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator have approached us and said, would you reconsider scenario C, but removing the roadways and adding back $10,000 for Master Plan Implementation Committee. So now everything from recommendation, from priority 19 and up is included in scenario C. So this would require changing the motion to embrace scenario C, the revised scenario C, if folks wanted to do this. But we need to talk with the schools before we do that. So the new total for C is $3,358,764. It's $90,000 less than it used to be. And it's less than the last override. So the last override was 3.4. It is $61,000 less than the last successful override. So,
Can you just
yes, Betty.
articulate the difference between, from the taxpayer's point of view, what's the difference between, on an average tax bill, what's the difference between B and C?
It was about $30, right, Mark? Right, Jonathan?
But you also
And it's
just took it, you
probably,
just took it
you
down.
just changed it, so it's gonna be less.
It'll be a little less now. So 3358764.
3150 today.
Too many files. 33587.
32. I mean, I'm up.
I don't remember the number anymore.
764.
It's too many numbers, isn't it?
3358764.
3358764. Okay, so the new impact to a homeowner with the average price home is $369 a year or $31 a month. So it came down, I think that was $2 that it came down, right? A month? And Betty, you want me to put in what B is? It's easier for me to remember the monthly impact. Right now is $31. Scenario B is 3140524. So we're gonna go from 369.31 to 345.29. So it's $2 less a month and
$24.
24 you said? About $24 a year.
Thank you.
Me?
Jonathan and then Jean, yep.
Could we, if we're gonna speak to the school committee, can we do
Yep.
that now? Because
Yes.
these are preliminary, presumably they will be arguing for additions as well.
Yep.
And so, to get a full picture.
Sure.
If we're gonna move from scenario B up over, we might as well have the whole thing in front of us.
Before the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator leave, I just want to see if there's
Of
any other
course.
questions for them. And Jean, what was yours?
When we increase, and I agree with increasing the master plan, because I think we really have to have a plan for going forward, especially with all the development in town. But what exactly will that buy us? I know we had several things I don't think anyone's here from the planning board. I know we had several things in that plan. And are there items that you particularly want to work on?
Yeah, so right now, the Master Plan Implementation Committee is looking at doing phase 1 of the Milton Village study, and that would mainly address the wharf area itself for the Friends of the Milton crew, the yacht club, to try to figure out what's the best location for a dock that would serve the high school crew team as well as the master's crew. The riverfront itself is phase 1, and we're getting a matching grant. It has to still be finalized, but it looks pretty good that we're going to get a matching grant from the MAPC to do most of that work, and we have to fund a little bit of it. There's a larger phase 2 that the Master Plan Implementation Committee would like to do in year 2, which would possibly rezone the Milton Village area for mixed use, look at some other revitalization opportunities there. So it could potentially lead to generating some additional revenue for the town if we're able to improve the Milton Village area as a result of that study. And we would have funding from MAPC. That's our current expectation for the second phase of the study.
Thank you.
I did work with Cheryl Tagayas, who's on the planning board and the master plan implementation committee, on a draft comment for the warrant, and I have it on the screen now. I've just highlighted essentially what Katie just said.
Oh, okay.
So that would be in our comment what that money would go towards. But yeah, she captured it nicely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator before we call the schools up? Yes, Maggie.
It's just regarding the stabilization fund. I'm just curious.
For the roadways?
Yeah. What everyone's thoughts are about not putting any money in it. So if the stabilization fund gets approved on the contingent side, it will be approved with no dollars in it, and is everyone okay with that? And I'm trying to, maybe the selectmen can say their reasoning for not wanting to put any money in it. I mean, I think I can go either way, but I'm just like to have some more clarification.
Chuck?
I was just going to say, we may get to that when we're talking about the contingent free cash vote, which we haven't taken yet. Feels like things are moving in that direction.
We like Lucinda's idea about the free cash.
Yeah, that's exactly, the discussion that needs to take place regarding that. I think that obviously roads, there isn't enough money that we can put each year into those, so I'm hoping that will be part of that.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Leroy and anybody else who wants to come up from the schools?
Good evening.
Hi, Chair Walker. How are you?
Okay. So, as I understand it, the question is if we had an additional $61,425 to add back, how would we do that?
Well, that's a way to phrase it. The Board of Selectmen and the town administrator just approached and asked us to increase scenario B by $57,838.
Okay. That's a figure that doesn't quite match up, but I think what we would do is add back, or request that you add back, the halftime guidance counselor and the halftime transitions adjustment counselor, and you can show that as a total of $57,000.
You're going to give one of them a pay cut?
We'll figure it out.
Okay. So right now it's $62,500, and for the towns we added back $57,838. So.
But for absolute parity, we can show that as $57,000.
Yeah, there isn't absolute parity right now. I haven't. If I were to add down through, it doesn't work like that. Let's see. So that scenario would fund the town in the schools in the contingent $857,150, and the town would be at $826. So if we added back both those positions fully, you're about $30,000 higher than the town side. If we just add back one of those positions, you're at $825,900, and the schools are at $826,123. So you're $1,000 shy with just one of the part-time positions.
Well, I'd ask the warrant committee and the town to, since we're actually talking about positions that deliver services here, I'd ask the town and the warrant committee to allow us to be slightly over so that we can add back both positions. I think Ms. White has talked about the importance of the transitions program, and this at least gets us a portion of that. As you might recall during the discussion, the total request was for a 1.0 sped teacher and a halftime adjustment counselor. This at least gets us the adjustment counselor.
So what this does essentially is in scenario C, it does not restore the English teacher.
Correct.
But restores the other positions, which has the effect of dropping the overall scenario C to $3,296,264, and that is $123,000, almost $124,000 less than the last successful override. and 3296264. $3296264. The impact to the average homeowner would be $362 a year or $30 a month. So it's actually come down $1. So the net result of that, guys, wasn't actually the schools adding back anything to scenario C. It's adding to scenario B. They actually took away from scenario C. Scenario C is down to 3296, which is just a little higher than scenario B. Questions for Chair Walker? Yeah,
No,
Chuck.
I don't have a question, so
Okay.
I'll wait.
No, all right. Anybody have a question for the schools? Thank you, Leroy.
Thank you.
Yes, Chuck.
So do we vote no to this motion and
You could ask Jonathan to rescind it.
I'll withdraw.
Withdraw the motion. So yeah, now would be the time if somebody wanted to embrace scenario C, or we could have more discussion.
I make a motion to embrace scenario C.
Okay, as amended, please.
As amended, yes.
So the new scenario C for the town side goes down to the DPW conservation agent, and and it's been changed. It no longer has the roadways in it. It has $10,000 for the master plan implementation committee instead. And on the school side, scenario C goes through the transitions, but it does not fund the restoration of the English teacher. The new total is $3,296,264. I did not hear who seconded Michael's motion. Maggie, okay. Discussion. Lucinda.
I just want to see the priority list again.
Whose?
The C. what we're
The
talking about.
town priority list
Yes,
is here.
please. Yes,
The non-school, priority list is here.
maybe.
And it
if you
includes the
put in-
highlighted row.
Can you enlarge it a little? I'm not
little
seeing very
bigger?
well tonight. I'm straining, yeah. Okay.
So it goes to the end of the yellow section.
Yeah, okay.
And
And if
sorry,
we go
that
down-
number, I'm gonna, Phil, do you mind if I take away the white?
No, go ahead.
Okay. That would make, it'll make it a little easier for folks to see.
And then just go up a little. I
You
mean,
want
I wanna
to see what's
below,
missing?
yeah.
So scenario D and E are not included. You can see there what's in
Right.
scenario D and E.
Right, no, I like these charts. I want to compliment you.
Well,
about
thank you. I
Yeah.
spent some time on them.
Yeah, I can tell. Okay.
Yeah, do you have a question?
Now this is just me listening to Betty about the library, the library not being open on Saturdays and all
Yeah.
that type of thing. I'm getting concerned. I'm getting concerned that we're not supporting the library enough with help. And that's so far down the list, I don't know whether I can lobby for it.
There
But-
is another library position that's higher on the list. So they are getting a reference technology librarian and the
Okay.
associated materials. We've replaced everything that was in the
Right.
cuts, so they won't be closing on Wednesdays, they won't be closing on Saturdays, and they
Okay.
get one extra FTE.
It was the Saturdays I was worried
Yeah.
about, because I think that's the same thing for families. They need it open on Saturdays. Okay.
And then-
Other
and-
discussion, Jean?
Yeah, and then in the same regard, are they getting the materials restored also?
Yes.
There were
Yeah.
2 items, did they get them both, the 5,000?
Yeah, so
and
the $55,000 reference technology
Yeah.
librarian comes with a 13% increase for the materials appropriation, and that's $7,212, and we included it.
Okay, and then there was 7,000, okay.
Yep.
All right, I thought there was another amount to the.
You might be thinking of what was cut in the non-contingent
Yeah,
budget.
okay.
And that was restored under
Okay,
under
great.
scenario C.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Other discussion on scenario
Between lines
C, isn't
15,
it? I'm sorry, didn't see.
between lines 15 and 16, are you accomplishing what you want to accomplish? Could be just labeling and then just.
Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, so 50,000 is to the law. We right now are funding the master plan implementation committee at $35,000 through the contingent budget, plus $15,000 in free cash, which brings you to 50, and their original request was $50,000.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Others?
Oh, so we've lost the cemetery, the trees for the cemetery.
Yes.
The cemetery
cut.
trees are not in, and there is nothing else for the cemetery in the contingent budget, but all of their cuts have been replaced.
Okay.
So they took some cuts under the non-contingent budget, and they've been made whole under this contingent scenario.
Okay.
So no cuts. Seeing no further discussion, then I'm going to call for a vote, which is to approve scenario C as amended for a contingent budget of 3296264. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Aye.
The one opposed, and Brian voted in favor of the scenario C as amended. Great, the motion carries. We have a contingent budget. Thanks, everybody. I almost feel like clapping. It's been a long road. All right. So then let's move back to talk about the free cash situation. So on the screen, you see the non-contingent. I've saved this as a second tab, so we're going to change this to contingent now. And we have the matter of $158,000 on the consolidated facilities line for repairs and maintenance. They've just been funded through the contingent budget at $100,000. So you might want to take $100,000 out of that number and fund the roadways at this point, or maybe you want to partially fund the roadways and partially fund something else more. I will add the roadway stabilization fund while you're thinking right here. Oh, don't give me a problem. Is it okay if I reduce this by $100,000? Is that matching people's expectations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they'd be funded at $58,000 in the contingent scenario, leaving us a balance of $100,000 to spend elsewhere in the contingent budget.
And he got his new position, right?
Chuck?
So I recommend that we spend it on roadways.
Yes.
I second that.
Second.
Thanks, Lucinda.
Did he get his new position, the craftsman?
You want to make a motion, Chuck?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the contingent one-time cash expenditures as presented on the screen.
Great.
Second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any discussion? Oh, yes. Hold that
No,
motion.
hold
Chair Walker?
It isn't that often that we have the opportunity to give money back, but as it turns out, the Discovering Justice item is being funded by the Milton Foundation for Education, so
Oh,
we won't need that money.
Which one is that? Yeah, I didn't hear it.
The Discovering Justice curriculum is being funded by the Milton Foundation for Education, so we won't need to fund that out of free cash.
That's great.
Wow, that's amazing.
Chair Walker, so the Milton Foundation is going to do that in either scenario, contingent or
Yes.
non-contingent?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so if I make that 0, you now have another $30,000 to spend somewhere.
Professional development schools?
Could that be a one-time spend? Let me look at this sheet for a second. So the school priorities, they didn't get this $100,000 under the contingent budget for the professional development. Amy or anybody, does anybody want to object to possibly spending free cash of $30,000 on professional development? Probably could be considered a one-time item because it doesn't keep reoccurring, but I don't know. It depends on the nature of the development, I guess.
I would say that's fine as long as when we go to look at it.
Chair Walker, do you want to join Amy at the table? Tell us if you think it's a bad idea or not.
My opinion is that's an appropriate use as long as we take that into consideration when we go to do the FY19 budget,
Okay.
that it was free cash.
I do agree. Thank you.
You like it? So discovering justice will become professional development?
Sure.
Or can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Down, I'm still looking at the things that down below are what we'd want to try and fund.
Yep.
And I guess my question, well, I guess professional development. I was thinking about the message boards. I'm thinking more about this traffic issue that's going on, because that is relevant to children.
Sure.
And old ladies.
Yeah, the thing that caused me to pull Amy and Leroy up to the table on Michael's suggestion was that the money was originally earmarked for the schools for free cash, so if we can come up with another schools-related item to spend it on, and so your point is well taken on traffic affecting the schools, but I do like the way the town administrator has articulated a multi-prong approach to attacking traffic. One is the variable message boards, the second is the radar speed monitoring, and the third is the reduction of the speed limit in thickly settled areas. So I think that we're doing a lot right now, money-wise and non-money-wise, to work on traffic, so I just want to point that out.
Okay.
How do others feel about reappropriating that $30,000 from the schools to the schools for a different purpose? Professional development didn't make it in. It's their next item on the priority list. It seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right. So there was a motion on the table. Chuck, did you make it?
I did.
Would you take a friendly amendment to amend that line as noted?
I would.
Okay. And then who seconded it?
I'll second
Jonathan
that.
did. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
All right. So all those in favor of the contingent budget as noted? Are you still with us, Brian?
No, he isn't.
Okay, dropped off. So everybody present, and the minutes will note that Brian dropped off, so it was unanimous without Brian. Okay, great. And appreciate both of you coming back up. We have to go back and revote the non-contingent now.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will change discovering justice, which was in there for $30,000, to professional development. And may I have a motion for the non-contingent use of one-time funds? Chuck?
Yeah, so moved. What do I actually have to say? I'd like to make a motion to vote the non-contingent one-time cash funds as amended on screen.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Betty. Any discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous. Great, thanks very much. We're flying, I love it.
We are.
We can go home soon, Betty. All right, so we took care of free cash. We voted the non-contingent budget. We voted the contingent budget. And now at this point, we would move into talking about articles if folks wanted to. Is there anything else on the budget that folks wanted to discuss? No. All right, well then, before we switch gears, why don't we take a 5-minute recess and then come back? That was a big thing to slog through. So let's take 5 minutes and then come back to this, all right? Okay, welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the long break. I needed to check my notes. I actually have not heard back from town council on 2 of the outstanding articles that we have to vote, and the third one we did defer until Monday. We're waiting for some more information to come in. So I believe we only have 1 article to discuss tonight, and that is an issue that Maggie wants to talk with us about. And then we're going to talk about the schedule, and then we'll be done for this evening. Okay, so Maggie.
I'd like to make a motion to reopen the fundamental speed law article for discussion.
Okay, and I have it on the screen. Why don't you explain why you want to make the motion so you can maybe get a second to it?
Well, when the Board of Selectmen were here, if you recall, the reason why they didn't want to have the Traffic Commission involved was they said we would be changing the Massachusetts Chapter 90 general law. So I did some research on this law, and I found out that that would not be changing it. It would be allowed. It could be a traffic commission. It can be a safety officer. There are other people that are allowed to be involved with this law. So I also found out I'm one of those nerds that I like to read this stuff, that in addition to the Traffic Commission, we were voting to approve the Mass General Law, Section 193, Section 17C, that's under Governor Baker's Municipal Modernization Act, that we also have an opportunity for Milton to also adopt Section 18B of Section 194 of Chapter 90. It's as though I feel we're considering one half of the law and not the other. And what Section 18B of Section 194 states is that we have the opportunity to also enact something called the Designated Safety Zone. And what that does, it allows the Board of Selectmen or the Traffic Commission to reduce the speed limit to 20 miles per hour, not in just the school designated zones that we have now. It gives them the option by also enacting on this section to reduce 20 miles an hour wherever they feel it's necessary. Maybe it's in front of a senior center. It could be in another area. So in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to just take half of this bill without going the full gamut and having it at the same time if we're, making a motion to approve this. And I'd also, like to make a friendly amendment in the wording, which I included on the second page of the article. And I wrote, and you can read it to see if the town will accept this, and I've also included the second part of it. But I feel like that it should be something that the Traffic Commission, I think they should be the ones, and before people thought it was okay, but they, Mr. Burns said that it wasn't allowed under this law, and it is allowed. I think it's very important to let the experts be the ones that go to the Board of Selectmen and state which streets they feel should be reduced. So I'd like to see that the Traffic Commission are the ones that are making those expert decisions, because that's what they do day in and day out. The Board of Selectmen do a great job, but they're the chairman of the board. They're supposed to be at this level, and they have all of these experts that work full-time, and they know this stuff. So I feel those are the ones that should go to the Board of Selectmen with their approval, make the recommendations on what they do best on the traffic.
So Maggie, I think that you're suggesting 3 main changes. One is to have the recommendation of the Milton Traffic Commission added in. Another is to have the Traffic Commission complete a study or analysis. And then the third is to add in Section 18B. I want to point out with respect to that third item, that the Warrant Committee, when we're reviewing an article that's been placed on the warrant by the Board of Selectmen, the Warrant Committee has purview to make articles smaller in nature, but we can't expand the scope of them.
I knew you were going to say that.
Sorry.
But it hasn't gone to town meeting yet. perhaps the Board of Selectmen are able to expand it before we finalize it.
So, yeah, you could make a suggestion to the Board of Selectmen that they reopen the warrant, expand the article, and then close, but we can't, in our
Okay.
recommendation tonight, make that change
Right.
to expand the scope of it, because it won't pass by town moderator, I don't think, because in general, the warrant committee can't make broader articles, they can make them narrower. Mark?
Yeah, so just one thought on this, and, you know, I totally understand why a 20-mile-per-hour zone would be warranted in a lot of places, but if I recall, the implementation of the 25-mile-per-hour zone was going to be, we weren't going to have to purchase a bunch of signs to accomplish that. Instead, there was going to be a single sign at all the entry points in the town.
Or we were gonna change numbers.
And then we would only post on streets where 25-mile-per-hour was not the speed limit, you would post the alternative. Would this, if we were to do this, which I know we can't, just what was just
Right.
stated, but you would then have to put up a bunch of 20-mile-per-hour speed limit signs.
Well, just, I imagine just like the school zone, you know, when flashing. Well, if there's a certain area that the selectmen and the traffic commission feel really needs something slower, there are senior areas perhaps, you know, within town that they're concerned about, they'll have that option. I'm not saying they have to utilize it, but if we're going forward and we're trying to vote Chapter 90, Section, you know, 194, it just makes sense to add this other part in. In my opinion, maybe they have a reason why they didn't want to go further and add it.
Selectman Burns, do you want to join us? Anybody else from the selectmen that wants to join us as well, or the town administrator, feel free. So it sounds like Maggie's making 3 suggestions here. You want to address her requests, suggestions?
Well, first off, I'd like to just address the, you know, the issue about the traffic commission. So that's a bylaw, okay? That's a commission. We, as I said in the last time I spoke here last week, we wouldn't do anything without their recommendation. That's how we operate. They come, make a recommendation, and then we vote on it. So, I mean, that's mute. That's a non-issue. Right off the bat, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, we wouldn't be a good board if we didn't, you know, listen to people and committees for their advice and structure and guidance. So, so I'll speak to that. Madam Chair, do you want to speak to the first one?
The scope issue, we can certainly look at the additional statute that Maggie suggested to us. It's late in the game to be reopening and closing the warrant and putting this back before you. I know we're going to the printer next week, so we would have to do a little bit of research on that on our own, probably ask our town council for some advice on that. There's a fall town meeting, we can always go back and look at another statute. There's a lot in the Municipal Modernization Act, and we're looking at different aspects of it. There may be things that we'd be bringing forward at a future town meeting to ask town meeting to adopt, but right now, I think I said before to the warrant committee, this request for the fundamental speed limit came into us from a neighborhood association. We talked about it, we thought it was a good idea to put it forward. We haven't discussed the other article, we don't have our third member here tonight, so we would not be inclined at this point to look to revise this article, but it's possible that we may agree down the road that it's a good idea to bring that forward and bring a separate article at that time.
Would you be opposed to having the friendly amendment now that we know the Massachusetts chapter laws state the Milton Traffic Commission are in fact covered under that law? Because you are actually the chairman of the board as in a private corporation. You hire department heads to do the actual work. So I don't understand the reasoning why you feel it should be your position to be the people that are actually doing the work when you have other jobs. This is their job. If you don't have the right people doing their jobs, it's as though you're saying you're going to micromanage them and you don't trust them enough to be able to make these decisions.
Well, Maggie, actually, under the new strong town administrative format, we do not hire the department heads, the town administrator.
That's
does.
fine, but you understand the gist of what I'm saying. You have to let your people do their
I just
jobs.
want to remind folks to not interrupt each other, but David, did you have a?
Yeah, and I just, you know, we're a policy and advisory board at this point. You know, that's our focus. And so it's our job to take in information and to advise. And our town administrator, you know, he's responsible with those decisions.
Thank you.
So you've brought other articles before the board, and it's been in joint with consolidated facilities and the town administrator, and then another article. I don't see any articles that, other than this, and it seems as though the Board of Selectmen want to take over the traffic duties, and I don't understand. I don't think it's a really good precedent to have one board in charge of everything. Yes, you say that you're always going to go with the Traffic Commission and seek their guidance. Well, if that's the case, I don't understand the issue with actually putting it in this bylaw, in this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, can I just speak further to that?
Yes.
The existing bylaw governing the Traffic Commission, which is an advisory body to the Board of Selectmen, the Traffic Commission, traffic issues cannot come directly to the board. Traffic issues by bylaw have to go to the Traffic Commission first for review and study, and only upon a recommendation of the Traffic Commission can they come to the Board of Selectmen. So not only would it be the board's way of doing things, consistent with what the board has done in the past, or what the current board's preference still is, to obviously defer to experts on the Traffic Commission to weigh in on traffic issues and give us their guidance, but it's also a bylaw requirement.
And I think that's great, Katie, but so I'm just trying to figure out why you wouldn't also, if you're doing this law, want to maybe co-sponsor it jointly with them, and have the wording in here like you do in other amendments.
Okay. Do you have something?
I'm not sure I agree with the CEO analogy, but even if you use that analogy, a CEO does take counsel from people they hire or not, but ultimately the decision rests with them. So, I mean, that would be kind of consistent with going back, which is, yes, obviously they'll go to the traffic commission all the time, but the decision ultimately should be left with the Board of Selectmen because, there's other factors.
Maggie, if I could break your suggestions into two so that we can deal with them one at a time. I think that the nature of what you're trying to accomplish here is what I wrote on the board. I revised the recommendation, which is to say, allow the Board of Selectmen, upon a recommendation of the Traffic Commission, to establish a speed limit of 25 miles per hour. Now, Chair Conlon has just said that she doesn't think that's necessary, and that's actually the way the Traffic Commission operates at this point, so it sounds like they wouldn't embrace that change. But if you like that wording and you want to make a motion and see if the Warrant Committee will agree to it, we can have a discussion about that.
I make a motion to approve the recommended bylaw as presented.
To approve the recommendation as amended.
As amended, yes.
Okay. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so now let's have some discussion. How do people feel about making this change to this recommendation? Chuck?
So this is just what's going to happen anyway.
That's
So this will get us out of here quicker, I'm all for it.
David or Katie, do you see a downside of adding in that clause or perceive any conflicts, unintended conflicts that it might create?
I don't. I mean, I think that, obviously it is a bylaw, so it's kind of mute. I don't think it needs to be in there, but I mean, if it speeds up the process, and I don't think if the town council doesn't have an issue with it, and I don't think we have an issue with it.
Jonathan?
If we're meeting Monday, I believe.
Yeah.
Can we get an opinion from town council? And if town council approves it, I have no problem.
Katie, could you add this to your list to talk to John Flynn about tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay, I will email it to you.
Not to be if town council is either going to come back and say it's a problem, or it just reaffirms what's already happening, I'm not sure if that's great use of his time.
Hopefully it would be a quick answer. But
Okay.
yeah, he's on retainer. We don't pay him for every conversation we have. But point taken. Anybody else? So we'll seek the advice of town council and maybe hold this vote until Monday? Okay, Maggie, would you mind withdrawing your motion until Monday then, so that we can get the advice of town council?
I withdraw my motion until Monday.
Thank you. All right, anything else on this article for right now? Anything else on any of the articles before we discuss the schedule? The Board of Selectmen, at least Katie, will be back with us on Monday to talk about the Traffic Commission, and then we'll be discussing this article now again, and hopefully we'll be able to vote on the stabilization funds, or excuse me, the revolving funds, once we hear back from town council. Okay?
I will be out of town, so I will be unable to attend on Monday.
We will miss you. Thanks, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I just had one
Yes.
quick question.
Jean?
Did you hear anything else about the governor's money? Is it,
The budget?
yeah?
Oh, yeah. I'm not aware of anything.
Amy left, I think.
Okay.
No updates yet. I have a feeling we might have to be making a change to, before town meeting to our recommendations, but we'll see. Thank you both very much.
Thanks again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'll just mention the schedule now and remind folks of the upcoming meetings. So we have on the 20th, on Monday, I'm hoping to have the warrant to a place where we can put it up on the wall and vote recommendations that are in the warrant, so that when we send it to the printer on Wednesday, it's going with your support. There's the chance that we might have to vote some things later and make some small changes, but if we can get to the warrant on Monday, then we're doing well time-wise, and it just means that Julia and I have a lot of writing to do this weekend. Also on the agenda on Monday are the articles that I just mentioned that Katie is checking with town council about. And I've put on the agenda the election of an acting chair and acting secretary for the time period of town meeting when I am out of the country. So we'll be discussing that on Monday night. I would appreciate it if you would continue to hold next Wednesday. There is currently no meeting planned, and I'll announce on Monday whether or not we need to have that meeting on Wednesday. A lot of it comes down to how far Julia and I get through the warrant over the weekend. Let's say we run into a snag, or we don't hear back from town council, or something else pops up. We may need that Wednesday to do some votes. If we don't have that meeting, or if we do have that meeting, the next time we meet is on the 29th. So please plan to meet on Monday the 20th and Wednesday the 29th, and hold Wednesday the 22nd. Yes? I will email it to you tonight if you like. Sure. I'll send you the spreadsheets and the schedule.
Good.
Any questions? Want to make a motion, Chuck?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Betty. Sorry, all those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, thank you. Good night, everybody.